Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, all the places, all the time zones, whether you're watching now or later. It's just after 9 a.m. my time in California. It's a nice overcast, cool day. So today we are going to be talking about the brain. And specifically, we'll be looking at the frontal lobe. So we'll be looking at the, lobes technically, right? The frontal lobes right up here. So I wanted to begin, we're calling this class the frontal lobe at our fingertips, because ultimately we're going to be using self-care tools to address this part of the brain. But before we started, I wanted to get an idea of what you think, where you are, what do you know so far about the frontal lobe? So I'm going to go ahead and admit somebody, and then I'm going to share my screen. So share screen. Okay. This is what we're doing. Okay. For some reason. There we go. So I just wanted to write down what comes to mind. Oh, maybe I can't write it down. I'll just listen. What comes to mind when you hear the word frontal lobe or frontal cortex? And just unmute yourself and shout it out. I was going to type as we go, but with this in I think it's in like a slideshow mode. I can't type. So go ahead and shout out whatever comes to mind.
Brain.
Brain. What else?
Some self-restraint.
Ooh, self-restraint. I love that. Yeah, self-restraint.
Emotions.
Emotions.
Attention deficit.
Attention deficit.
And I think of lobotomy too.
Yeah.
Focus, lack of focus.
Focus and lack of focus. Yeah, I like that you brought up the two, right? And Laura, you just went there too. It's attention, attention deficit, focus, lack of focus. I like that. What else comes to mind? What else comes to mind?
Thoughts.
Thoughts. Good. Could even be like not even anything we've ever learned before, right? But if we think of like front, right? What is at the fore? It could be simply just that, right? It's at the front of the brain.
The eyes.
The eyes, that which we see, sight, perception. Yeah, totally. Anything else?
Judgment.
Judgment. Yes.
Third eye.
Third eye. I like that. That's interesting. Yeah, third eye. When we think of third eye, right? That's a whole other because that could be even like fore. Well, the word fore is in there, but like forethought or like what we can see into the future. We could kind of see ahead, right? Yeah, clarity. Anything else? Everything said so far is really good. All right, let's move into some of what it is. Okay, the brain and the frontal lobe. So just to begin, and I always start my classes like this, especially when dealing with the brain, just in case somebody watches only this class and never any of my other videos. So the brain is an organ. And actually, the sentence here reads, the brain is an organ. It receives, processes, stores, interprets, and sends information. It sends signals, messages. The John Hopkins, the brain is an organ. It is a very complex organ. And what's very interesting about it, when I think about organs as such, is this particular complex organ is determining how we taste, touch, feel, like every single aspect of our existence begins at the level of a brain. Admit. Welcome, Linda. So just to be aware of that at the level of the brain. The other thing that I've started to say a lot in my class is this kind of understanding of the nervous system in a very basic way. So our central nervous system is our spinal cord and our brain. This is really important when we think about how we take in all information. All information, right? So how I take in that tree, how I take in this tea, how I taste it, the warmth of it, every single aspect, every single sensory experience I have, whether I'm tasting it, I'm touching it, it's touching me. This is all external stimuli, right? It's external stuff. In order for that to be experienced, in order for us to have those emotions, those deficits, those whatever the things that we think we have are, in order for those to be lit up, it has to go through an internal process, and that's the spinal cord and the brain. So I've been thinking this idea of cognition and recognition, right? Cognition and recognition. Everything that is happening here, but it has to be experienced in an external way first, or an internal way first, but then processed via the spinal cord and the brain. Okay. Next up, we have 4 lobes. Technically, we may have 5, right? Some people say 4, some people say 5. The 4 lobes of the brain, and it is plural because they're paired. So the frontal lobe is up here, right? And there's one on the right hemisphere and one on the left hemisphere. So those are the frontal lobes. That's what we're doing today. Just so we have context too, we also have parietal lobes, right? And once I unshare my screen, we'll look more at our own heads in space. Parietal lobes are on top, right? Right behind that frontal lobe. Again, right hemisphere, left hemisphere. We have the temporal lobes. We have the occipital lobes, which are at back. We also have the insular or the insula or the insular cortex. This is kind of known as the 5th lobe. And I actually thought when I was creating this class, that it'd be really fun to do a class on each of the lobes, especially the insula, because it's to some, it's not considered a lobe, but there's so much to it. And I think it would be a really rich class. It enters some of my other classes because it has a lot to do with certain kind of emotional content, certain kind of ways of receiving emotion. So the frontal lobe, and some of these you said, high level cognition, executive function, right? So this is like your reasoning brain, problem solving, emotional processing on a high level. Memories are stored at the level of this lobe. Impulse control, I think somebody said that. Inhibitions, whether you do or do not do something. Voluntary movement. And the voluntary movement, we'll break it down a little bit more because it gets a little bit more specific than that, but it also has to do with voluntary movement up here. Another thing to consider is personality and social interactions and relationships. They're governed by what is going on at the level of the frontal lobe. So who you are, your personality is determined by the connectivity and what those nerve cells are doing and how they're interacting at the level of the brain, okay? Another thing to be aware of is in each of the lobes, there are cortices. A cortice is just plural for cortex, right? So we know there's the cerebral cortex, right? So the cerebral cortex is divided into these lobes, and there's cortices throughout. And a cortice, again, is just where there are nerve cells and that connectivity that happens. So if you're including the insula or the insular cortex, there are going to be 10 lobes. Otherwise, there are 8. And 8 is what you're going to see if you take a general class, or you'll see this on Google all the time, right? If you just look up the lobes of the brain, you're going to generally see those 4. But like I said, the insula is really important. the frontal cortex. So we have other cortices there as well. We have one called the premotor and another called the primary motor. Together, they make up a motor cortex. Okay. So the premotor cortex is all about planning the movement, right? Planning the arm lift, planning the motor action. That's the premotor cortex. That's what those nerve cells are responsible for. The primary motor is the execution of that actual voluntary movement. What's cool is that prefrontal cortex, I was trying to figure out how to say this, that prefrontal cortex, it's involved with actually the idea of movement, like kind of planning, right? It's almost like the premeditation of a movement. The premotor is like plan for the movement, and then the primary is like do the movement. So you have all those things in place when it comes to the movement itself, a voluntary movement. And then, okay, so we went through these already. It's just listed in a slightly different form. If you want to take a screenshot or if you didn't write it down, you can do so. Just to kind of repeat, this motor cortex consists of the premotor and the primary motor cortex. It's with planning, coordinating, and executing movement. I wanted to also talk about the Broca's area because it's at the level of this lobe. So Broca's area and Wernicke's area are both there. Most people are right-handed, which is governed by the left hemisphere, right? So that would mean that the Broca's area and the Wernicke's area are both in the left hemisphere of the frontal lobe, dictating what we do with the right side of our body. Hence, right-handed people have it on this side of the body. That would mean that the Broca's area and the Wernicke's area, if you're left-handed, is going to be on the right side of the brain, the right side of the frontal lobe. Okay. Oh, let's see if I could remember. Something just came to mind. You know, if somebody is, I'll look this up to make sure, and if I'm wrong, I'll put a little note under the video. If there is a problem at the level of Broca's area, it's that plans for language production. So it means that if there's damage that's happened to that area, that person will have problems speaking. If they have damage or anything going on at the level of Wernicke's area, it's jumbled speech. I'm almost positive I'm remembering that correctly. If I'm not, I'll put a little note in under the video for sure. Another thing just to think about when we think about motor and memory and how an example of how it works is when we retrace steps in our mind of like, where are our keys? Where did I leave my credit card? That's the part of the brain that we're activating in that case. Okay. So far, so good. Okay. Good. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. Stop the share. End show. Okay. So are there any questions so far? That was like the word part of this. I wanted to get that out first to make sure we have an understanding. What are you thinking? Does this make sense? And any questions?
Yeah.
Good. Good. Marie.
So Chantel, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I find when I move, like whether it's dance, doing dance classes or yoga, if I don't think, then I can do it. So are we using, the motor and the memory? Is there a way that we're using some of the prefrontal stuff where it's like, do you know what I mean? It's like you almost feel it in your body, but there's like this motor movement that happens. It doesn't necessarily have memory because it might be the first time you've initiated that movement. But I would be thinking that it would be using that prefrontal and the frontal cortex to be able to do that, right?
It's very interesting. There's a part of me that wants to say yes, and a part of me that's going in this other direction. Yeah. When you think of, well, because I was a dancer when I was young.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
movement was my first craft. Yeah, very, very interesting.
Because you know what I mean, right? Where you just
Totally.
kind of like, yeah.
Well, because you're touching on something very interesting, which is when I think you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like when I let go, when I don't think so much about it. So I think this is actually letting go of the prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
That's my intuition on it.
Yeah. Okay. That
If
makes
anything,
sense.
when we think of those kind of deeper layer areas and glands like the limbic system, when we think about when you think about like the parts of the brain that are before higher cognitive function was like a thing that we needed, I would say like base level intuition, kind of connection to spirit. I think when we let go, we're tapping into something else. Maybe that has more to do with the heart and the gut brain. Maybe it has to do with like that vagal nerve stimulation. It might have to do with that. That's a great question. Yeah.
Maybe in the beginning when you're learning. So like if you're learning something, then maybe that would be it. I don't know.
For sure.
When there's a point where you switch off and you're just in your body and the movement takes over, that would be the absence of prefrontal. But maybe when you're working so hard and you're trying to get the steps and you're trying to do that, the brain there is hooked in. Yeah.
That is exactly when you're trying. Yeah. Anything where I'm organizing thoughts in my brain, where it is essential that I put the number 2 after the letter 1, if I'm trying to remember steps, we're going to need executive function. Absolutely. And that's happening at that level. And then the really great question is what happens right when we let go? I would say, and maybe it's 2-part. We're still needing that premotor and the primary motor for sure, because that's voluntary movement, right? That's saying like, I'm going to move. I moved. It's definitely saying that. But there's something else you're talking about, which I'm totally interested in, which is what happens when the spirit flies. What happens when we let go? What's really happening at the level of these kind of computer systems within us when we let go?
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's very cool.
Anybody have anything to say about that or anything else? Any other insights or questions before we move on? All right, let's move on. What are we moving into? What do we do now? I think I was going to share my screen again, but no, I don't want to share my screen. Let's not be a class made of entirely screen shares. Let's do an exercise. Let's dive in. So the rest of the class, this is what's going to happen. We're going to do stuff. We're going to do some exercises that will help us ignite and calm this part of the brain. If you're in my brain and pain class, 2 of the things that we're going to start with today, you've done before, but we're going to do them in a slightly different way. And that's going to be the scalp grazing, right? Those gentle moves. I'm going to introduce a way to do that from a reflexology perspective. We're going to do brain cleansing exercise, which I love, right? That's really good for the neck too. We're going to do that today. And then we're going to move into some moves in reflexology in the thumbs. And then we're going to end with mudras. That's going to be the rest of our day, okay? And I will share some maps with you just so you have an idea what we're doing, but I want us to get tactile right now, okay? So we're going to begin with the grazing. So when I taught this in the brain and pain class, we really gave attention to learning, and I will show you an example, but really learning where the fissures were. Fissures are like dividing lines, could also be a sulcus or a sulci, right? And I will show you an example of like the different ways in which we divide the brain into parts. So we were actually like going along those lines. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take our fingertips, but we're not going to be thinking about the lateral sulcus or the Sylvian fissure. We're not going to be doing it to that extent. But I just want you to take the fingertips and feel what it's like to graze the entirety of your scalp at this whole frontal level. So I actually want you to focus on the forehead and up a little and around. You're going to go into parietal, you're going to go into temporal, and that's good. But just see what it feels like to very, very gently, almost scratch without nails, this part of the brain via the skin. And you could explore, and I encourage you to explore now what it's like and the difference between if you just kind of scratch without nails, or if you go slower and almost move the skin, right? As if you're almost like moving it on top of the bone. So you'd be going like this, moving the skin, but not the bone, moving the skin. So in this way, it's like you're moving the skin on top of the skull, but in a really gentle, gentle way. And I'll be quiet just so we could do that for a minute. And notice if your breathing changes, if your jaw is clenched, if your neck is braced, go ahead and release those areas. If you're leaning forward, like I am right now, adjust so you're more central, more balanced. Good, and go ahead and let that go. And now with your palms, you're just going to palm the forehead. When you do this and you let your fingers go, you're actually palming the entire frontal the entire frontal lobe. So we'll take 3 breaths here. Good. And go ahead and let that go. We're going to we're going to mimic that, but we're going to do it around the entirety of every fingertip. So what that will look like, if you opened your eyes briefly, I was trying this nice scratch, and then I was kind of going like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, right? There's this real intention to and it is intention, right? It's my intention is to have access to the part of the body that is underneath where I'm touching. This is the essence also of what happens when we do Taoist internal exercises, right? Whether it's over the actual body part, the organ, the gland, or the meridian that takes care of a particular organ, gland, or area of the body. So in this way, very similar to a Taoist internal exercise, we're using our fingertips to move over the very area that I'm thinking that might need some calming. I think I know a lot of the time I live up here. I also live back here, right? I'm governed by my passion and my drive and my fears. All of that is present too. But I also live here a lot, right? Thinking about how to, what's next, what if, right? That's all here. That could calm. I know that if this calms, I'm going to be just fine. That's the irony I think of when I think about my brain is the more I focus on, Lori, you were saying, dance moves. If I'm like, I got to learn these dance moves. And I used to think like this. Like, I remember there was a time when There were certain dance moves, certain types of dance that were harder to remember, or being at an audition. I can't tell you how many times I was at an audition. I was like, they're moving way too fast. I can't see. There's 300 people in the room. I'm not going to get this move. I'm not going to get this. There's like all this energy. It's exhausting. All this energy. I mean, there's a lot going on there because there's a lot of worry and there's other parts of the brain that are also being ignited and activated. But let's just take care of this one, right? This like overproduction, this over need to like figure it out. So right now, instead, I'm going to trust that actually, if I let go, my brain knows what to do, right? This is the essence of, for those of you who are reflexologists, we don't have to, if someone's constipated, we don't have to move in the direction of peristalsis, even though I will, because I like having that intention added. But the body's intelligent. The body is really intelligent. I don't have to be intelligent about my intelligence and make sure that I get things right all the time. It's too much energy. It's too much. It's exhausting. Oh, and there's somebody to admit. Okay. So what I'd like us to explore now, and I've been doing this for a while now, because as you know, we were supposed to do this class a little earlier before little Emma got sick, and I'm having a blast doing it. It feels really relaxing for me. So I want to know how it is for you. I'm going to show you how to do it, and then we're going to be quiet. I'll be quiet so we could just kind of move through it together. So exactly what you just did at the level of the frontal lobe, I want you to do at the level of the reflexology areas in your fingers. I'm going to share my screen briefly just to show you where you're going to be going over. Also to have that in your mind's eye as you're doing these subtle, gentle, feather-like moves over all of your fingertips. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. So we were just here. Now we're going to move here. So this is how I've divided the thumbs. Now, as you know, when I think of mapping systems in reflexology, and not just reflexology, but other maps too, we are like a fractal. We are like that Mandelbrot set, right? So this thumb, yeah, it has your brain in it, but you could actually like make it so both thumbs go together and you have one brain. You could go 10 fingers, put them together, one brain, right? So right now, instead of having one brain here or one brain here, we're going to go one brain here. This is where it becomes like the fractal. It's like into infinity, right? We can access these parts of ourselves. So the frontal lobe is right here at the level of the fingertip and a little bit into the pad, right? So we're right here, right in that frontal layer. If I start to go down, I'll show you this later. If we start to go down, we're going to go into those deeper structures, right? Right out here, it's called the gray matter. It's only called gray matter because it's kind of a gray pinkish area if you were actually to look at the brain itself. And then underneath it is the white matter. All throughout here, you have those nerve cells, right? So this is what you're going to be stimulating as well. So we're going to be focusing on this. And like I said, it's totally cool that you come down in here. You're going to go down to the other side. What I've been exploring is going under my nail. Feels really, really gentle and sweet. So I encourage you to do that too. And then this is where the dividing lines are. So this is a big part of how, when I mapped out the brain, this was important, is what are these fissures? What are these? We know these are the gyri, these little bends here. And then we have the grooves here. But we have these lines that actually divide the different parts of the brain. Actually, that insula that I was telling you about, it lies right about here, right at the floor of the Sylvian fissure. That's where the insula is, that fifth lobe, right? You're going to see it here. You're going to see it here. So again, it's bilateral, just like every lobe, right? It's not just the frontal lobe. There's one, there's two of them. You have a left and a right hemisphere. And again, ignite your imagination. Maybe you're just working on that left hemisphere and have that in your brain as you begin the work. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the share because that's where we'll be here. So what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do, is just like this, these gentle moves like feather touch like this, or going back and forth like that with the skin, is I'm literally going to do this feather touch here. And I'm going to be pretty slow about it too. So I'm really feeling into that tactile experience. And after I've done the frontal lobe, I'm going to come over to here and I'm going to swoop under the nail because it feels so good. Either side, I mean, I'm sorry, one side to the other. And then I'm going to move on to my next finger. And so I would encourage you, what I'll do, and like I said, I'll be quiet so we could just do it together, is I'm not going to look down because that's going to distort my neck. You don't need to look at your fingers. You know where your fingers are. I am going to close my eyes or lower my gaze and keep my neck straight. I'm going to keep my jaw loose. I'm going to be aware of my pelvis, right? I have a tendency to curl in like a little puppy dog. I'm going to not do that, right? That's a habit of mine. So I'm aware of it and I'm going to get to let it go. And I'm going to begin with my thumb. I'll be quiet for the next 2 minutes and we'll move through one hand and then the other. Are there any questions before we start? Okay. And begin. And go ahead and bring that to a close. So I'd love to hear how that was for you. I will offer up that one of the things that I find interesting is what begins to fall away and what begins to come to the fore in my thoughts. So a word came forward when I was just here, kind of doing my thing, probably by the time I got to the third finger, and the word trust came in. Another thing that came in was what Lori said, right? That started to dance in my brain. And the impulse and the feeling of wanting to do less, right? And actually wanting to move to another finger faster. There was that. Another thing that came to mind is something the wonderful Sue Ricks shared with me. If you don't know Sue Ricks, she's magic. She teaches gentle touch reflexology. And she shared with me this way of tapping with the fingers. And I think she does that. She has a couple classes that she teaches that in. I highly recommend her work. It's yeah, I'll just say that. How was that for you? Was it weird? Did it feel relaxing? How are you guys?
I can see clearer. Very relaxed, but I can see clearer. It's really wild. Yeah.
Beautiful. And that physiologically too, you know this, physiologically too, what's happening when we relax and relax our eyes, we do see more clearly. Part of the reason why we have so many problems with our eyes is not just computers, but that we're focusing really hard. We're actually using those muscles too much. This is why palming the eyes. This is why Bates, when he put forth, I'm sure he wasn't the first one to say palm the eyes, but he was the first one to be known for it actually proving to help with helping with not just calming the eyes, but helping vision. Yeah, beautiful, Lori. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Very calming. But something that I would find it difficult to do on my own, like when I know five or seven women around the globe are doing it with me. But even though it would be good for me, I know I have a lot of tension in my hands.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot, and I even break my nails when I'm too much up here.
Yes.
Interesting. When I'm too much in the.
Yeah. It made me just think of in my other classes, I teach a couple live classes a week at a clinic up north, and I'm always telling them these are people that are not body workers, reflexologists. They're not in that field at all. They're at a clinic for their health, and I think if we could just do whatever it is, I always say to them 5 to 10 seconds, then you're good. You just have to do this weird thing, 5 to 10 seconds. And actually, just as you were talking, kind of like the Surix thing, you almost could just do 2 fingers. This is going to move us into our mudra later too, but that might actually make it easier if it's just kind of this rubbing together. So it's not actually going, so that might make it that it's easier. Very interesting because, well, 2 things. One, I think of if I was, say I'm on a really intense meeting, like a Zoom meeting, right? It's a work thing. I could be just rubbing that it, the thing is, it's not necessarily igniting my prefrontal cortex. It's actually calming it, right? So I could just do that as I'm listening, as I'm contributing. It does make you tired. So you just have to be aware of will you have access to your brain? I tend to have greater access the calmer I am. The more I have the courage to pause, the more my thoughts come. But 5 to 10 seconds, that might be an interesting thing. Also setting your alarm. So if you set your alarm for 3 times, to do self-care, whatever it is, for 5 to 10 seconds. And this is a good one. It's easy. Or the mudra might be easy too, right? That might help. Or the other possibility is we just have to get together more. We just have to like get together and do this. Beautiful. Anybody else? See Jan drinking her tea. Okay, so let's move on to the next. Let's actually move into the Taoist internal exercise, and then we'll end with reflexology and mudras. So the Taoist internal exercise, this is called brain cleansing number 1. It's in Dr. Stephen Chang's book. You would take your hands, you would fold in your thumb, you would go over with all your fingers, all right? It's very interesting, right? If this is the brain and you're going in and then you're folding over, you're actually going relax, right? You're saying you can go to sleep now. And then you go to the side. I'm like an A-frame. My hands are by my sides. All I'm going to do, we're going to do it 7 times together. And that's what you would do. For the self-care, you would do this exercise 7 times. 1 time is an inhale and an exhale. So the inhale would be your shoulders lifting to your ears, your chin raising to the ceiling, and you're inhaling. So that would be 1. And your exhale would be exhaling, depressing the shoulders and making it so that chin goes to your chest. Exhale. So let's do 7 of those. If it starts to hurt, don't do it, but it is good for the cervical spine. So it helps to free that up as well. When you're ready, inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Number 5, inhale. Exhale. 6, inhale. Exhale. Last one, inhale. Exhale. And come back up slowly. Open your eyes when you're ready. And you're good. Yeah, you could shake it out. You could scratch. You could touch your face. I'm a big, like, I like to like feel I'm still here. I exist. Okay. Let that go. So that's another self-care. I like these short self-care exercises because, you know, if the teacher continues to teach until she's learned the lesson, it's hard for me. I have to set a timer. I have to, if I could set a timer to set a timer, if I could, I would do that. I don't have that yet, but it's like, I have to remember, what really helps is talking to people. Just being in communication, having social interactions, right? I will leave my little tiny home every morning and I'll exit my door and go to somebody nearby and I'll sit and talk to them, right? It's like, it's that kind of social interaction that reminds me to take care, especially if I'm talking to, you know, some of you on the phone and we start to talk about like how hard something is. And we know that we could just do this, or there's that meditation that we love, but we haven't done it in a while. Suddenly we're like, oh, right. This is a reminder. We're talking about this. This is a reminder to me that I can do it, that I could take that time. What's next? Reflexology? Any questions? Any insights before we move into reflexology? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. We'll do reflexology and then mudras. All right. So this is what we were looking at when we were doing our gentle touch, or even like almost like a press and move side to side. Very, very gentle work. And this moves us into the brain reflexology areas. This is that insula I was telling you about, laying right on top of that Sylvian fissure on both sides. In this frontal cortex here, we're seeing a lot of where there are nerve cells. A lot of connectivity is happening at the level of the frontal cortex, right? So all of this stuff, there's a lot of firing going on in here. Another way to think about it is when I was talking about external stimuli and the process internally, what's happening is it's actually, as I mentioned, going up that spinal cord, our information highway. It goes through the medulla. I just put medulla, but it's medulla oblongata into the pons, right? That's our brainstem. And then it shoots. So it's shooting, whoops, 2 fingers. It's shooting up to the thalamus, right? And the thalamus being that kind of part of the brain that is like, I've heard it described as like, it's the one that's like directing traffic. So it like takes in that signal and then it like directs. So it's actually shooting it out. This is the thalamus here. And it's shooting it up, it's shooting it side, it's shooting it into all of the lobes, right? It's shooting it up into that frontal cortex where the premotor, the primary motor, and the prefrontal cortex are, right? It's shooting it up because it needs to shoot up where there's all that nerve connectivity to get the response, to know what message or signal to send back to the body, okay? So in reflexology, what we're going to be doing is it's going to be very similar to what we did with our grazing, but we're just going to be doing a literal press and hold and a little tilting up. So we're going to begin. I always like to begin at the level of the center where the circle or the dot is. Admit. Where the circle or dot is, and then I like to move up. When I move up this time, usually I just move up into a structure. So those of you who have taken my classes before, I often will do a tilting. I call it a press and tilt. And I'll show you again when I stop sharing the screen, or I'll do it to the side, right? A press and tilt to the side. In this way, I'm actually going to do a press and hold, and then I'm going to move up, and then I'm going to reset, move up, reset, move up, reset. In this way, I'm starting at the level of the pituitary gland, just because that's a good marker for us, because we know where it is, right? That's the center of the swirl on your fingerprint. And then we're going to just move up into that thalamus, and then we're going to move up and out into that tip of the thumb. And we could actually do all of the fingers. So now I'm going to stop my share one more time. Welcome, Tina. You can watch that as she's eating. People are drinking tea, eating food. Hello.
Yeah. Hi. Hi. Sorry,
Do...
I joined in late, but sorry about that.
Don't be sorry. I'm glad you're here. There is no such thing as late, and you could watch the beginning later. What is time?
Yes, exactly. That is my plan. I need to watch it later.
Good. I'm glad you're here now.
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, so what we're going to do is with every finger, we're going to start with our thumb. We're going to hold the back side. So this is my left hand. I'm going to hold the back of my thumb, that nail, with one finger. This is what's going to be doing the work. My pointer finger, it's going to press right at the center where that dot is, the center of the swirl fingerprint. I'm going to press in, that's the pituitary gland reflexology area, right? That's where I start. All I'm going to do is move up, and then I'm going to reset, move up. And I'm actually, when I reset, it's like I'm going here and up, and then I move over a little bit here, up, and then I move over a little bit here, up. So I'm actually getting that whole surface area, because the thalamus is a little bit bigger, right? So we're going to move up into that thalamus. It's receiving whatever signal has been sent, and then we're moving up into that frontal cortex where the motor cortex is, which remember is premotor cortex and primary cortex. Premotor is planning the action, planning the movement, and primary motor is executing the movement. And prefrontal cortex is that part of the brain that's like reasoning, higher cognitive function, inhibition, huge parts of your personality, all that stuff, right? So we're calming that whole area. So again, just as before, what we're going to do is we're going to do it on our own, and I'll be quiet for 2 minutes, and we're just going to do every single finger. And again, you won't be doing the rocking or tilting that I usually do. Instead, you press and hold, and you rock up, you reset. I'm kind of resetting in a huge way just to make a point. And then you go up and up. Okay, now I'll be quiet. You'll do that with every single finger. Every single finger. So about 1 minute per hand, or move faster if you want, and then go through twice, wherever your impulse is. And begin. Being aware of the breath and being aware if any thoughts come in or dissipate. I'm bringing it to a close. So again, I want to hear what comes up. So for me, I'll give you an example. What came up for me as an example is I'm here and I'm thinking, oh, I really want to end on an hour, right? Because I want to honor your time, right? I started to go into judgment and timing and all this other stuff outside myself. And then in the next instant, I was like, oh, look at what I'm doing. I'm doing something to calm that part of my brain that is worried about ending on time, even if we have a time. I didn't give ourselves a time. That's all in my head. So I came back to this and realized like, oh, I'm actually doing something to help that part of my brain fall away, which I actually don't need anymore. I've been living that way for too long. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If you have to go, you'll go. All right. That came in. And then another thing that came in is I was aware that my ring fingers were much more sensitive. So that was just kind of something I wanted to be aware of and that I could look into later. What came up for you guys? Any thoughts come to mind? Any insights?
Not
Quite
the
a sweet, oh,
Go ahead.
quite a sweet sense of interiority, of being in the body instead of up here. Sort of, oh, I'm here. This is my hand. I mean, in a lovely way.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you, Marie. Beautiful. Mm.
And when I touched all the side, not the center point, but on bilateral sides, on each side of the center, we're more tender on every finger.
Beautiful. So that's interesting. Can you hold up your fingers so we could see? Is it more? And then you felt, was it more on this side?
Well, it was more on just the lateral side of the center on both sides of the center. So if I went to the center, it wasn't as tender, but on either side,
yeah,
it was more tender on
beautiful.
all 10 fingers.
Awesome. And it's like whatever's tender, that's a call for attention. Yeah. That's the baby crying. Pick it up. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. Yeah, one of the things I always think about curiosity. This comes up a lot in trauma classes, but also in like any kind of brain class I teach, or actually any reflexology class. Let's just say any self-care class. How do we become more curious about our body? And especially, if you're not totally familiar, say you're not a reflexologist, you're just like, what is this? If we could be curious, how can I be curious about my tissue? I think that's a very powerful place to live in, because I am always going. There's so much I have to do to put in place. I was putting together this table last night. It took too long. There's so much going on all the time that what if I could just be curious about my thumb, about the tissue, about the fingerprint, like a child, right? There's like figuring out their toe for the first time. Like we've lost sight of that curiosity. The reason why it comes up in trauma classes is because curiosity is a very difficult emotion, for want of a better word, to access when you've experienced trauma. I brought this up recently. I don't know if it's in one of our classes or another class, but Terry Real brings up how, the autonomic nervous system every 4 seconds is asking itself, am I safe? Am I safe? Did I bring this up recently in one of the classes? No. Okay. It was another class. That's pretty intense, right? This idea of, am I safe? Am I safe? And I'm alone right now in a house with cats. Like, am I safe? Am I safe? That's intense. You could imagine if someone has deeper levels of trauma, that question's being asked much more. So curiosity is a gift. So the fact that I can give myself, if I could set my alarm and give myself 5 minutes, or like I said, Marie, 5 seconds to be curious about my body or my finger or my life, if I could be just really still and contemplate that cinnamon, like this thing I'm looking at. I think there's a lot in there. I think there's a gift in there that I've forgotten anyway. You dig?
So Chantel, I'm getting a headache.
Ooh.
Yeah. So,
Okay. Yeah.
on the temporal side, and I never get it on my left. Sometimes I get temporal headaches over here, and I use the thumb. I'm often working the temporal area of the thumb, and it goes away. But this is a new thing that it's on this side, and so and it's more temporal than it is. Well, it's actually from here over, so it is a little frontal. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, very interesting, right? And I'm like preaching to the choir right now. But okay, so you're like frontal, parietal, temporal, right? You're spanning a couple different lobes. One thing we know about pain, right? It's a message. It's saying something. It's saying hello. So pain is a message. Also, reflexology, however light, that kind of intention, what we're doing is also, it is detoxifying, right? So there's something being released. I'm using that word lightly because I know there are some people that maybe wouldn't use that word, but something is being expressed, right? And I think that's all I'll say is if there's pain coming up, do you feel like there's a call for more intention, to be there more? Is there a call to palm that area? Is there a call to meditate? What's the call?
Definitely drink more water. That definitely feels like that's part of the problem. Yeah. And I also feel like I just need to rub the area on my thumb. Yeah. And that looks it's interesting.
What about the grazing that we did? Do you think that would help?
Yes, because that was pretty powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost over my eye. That's wild. Okay. Thank you.
Beautiful. The other thing I'll bring up, and this isn't for you necessarily, but it makes me think of clients, right? This idea of when we start to, the very subtle work that I do, sometimes the more subtle I am, the more someone might get like a restless leg, right? Or they might start to like talk more. As the body is calming down, for some people, that's great and it's relaxing and they fall asleep. For other people, as we start to calm down, something is like, it's not safe. I don't want to calm down, right? So to be aware, I do this all the time. Like I am not someone who like goes around feeling safe. Like I often feel unsafe. That's part of just my life story that I get, which is cool because it means I get to be with it, right? I get to look back, I get to be in the present, I get to do weird things. But what I want to say about this, so knowing that part of my emotional biology, emotional physiology means that I have certain sensations that will come up for me and certain pain that will manifest in different parts of my body because something inside is trying to talk, that I obviously for however many years put on a show and didn't look at. So I also like this idea that pain or anxiety is an opportunity for us to listen. And also parts work is pretty powerful, right? This idea that we can hold a place that is feeling pain and actually speak to that part, right? We see this with more from a therapeutic standpoint. You might see it with internal family systems, IFS, where literally they talk to the parts, right? This is my sad part. This is my, but you could do it with body parts too, right? This little part, what do you need? What's going on, temporal lobe? What are you saying? That's another, I find, a way that I go in a lot when I start to feel.
It's related to the neck.
Ah, beautiful. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And they're now just even massaging this, it's starting to go away. Wow.
That I love that quote, I can't remember it right now, but it's like the power of we give away our oh gosh, what is it? We give away our power to the pill, the power that is really of one's consciousness. The trick is, can we be quiet enough to hear what consciousness, divine, God, whatever is trying to move through us? Can we be quiet enough, or for my purposes, calm enough to hear the message? Right? Beautiful. I love that. Yeah.
I actually every single time I either do Reiki or reflexology, I get this like tingly zingy, like electricity. Like I remember when I was getting my attunement, all 3 levels of my attunement, it was like lightning coming through. And it's kind of like it's pulsating and I feel it. Like I just came from, this is why I was late. I was just hanging out with another reflexologist and we were doing foot reflexology on each other and just talking and laughing. And now I'm sitting there and I'm sitting here and doing this and I feel the zing every single fingertip. It was just like, am I just still on this like high of reflexology that I was just in with my friend? But like I every single time, and then I just stopped, like sitting here doing it. I did one round and I was like, all right, let me just stop and wait. And then I did it again and I could still, even sitting here now talking to you guys, and I'm telling you, I could feel that zing right there. I love it. I don't know what it is, but I love it.
Yes. It's like, it's it. I think it, right? It's like, there's no words for it. It's like, it's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. Again, I think that's part of the, I would put that in the power category, right? There's this incredible power, this, yeah, beautiful. I love that.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to share before we end with mudras today? All right. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, I have a show happening back there. Oh my gosh. All right. So we're going to end with one mudra done 4 different ways. We're going to do the Gyan Mudra. It is definitely one of the most popular mudras because even people who don't know mudras will do this mudra. If you're a reflexologist or a body worker, sometimes, especially reflexologists, because people are lying generally on their back or sitting in a 0 gravity chair, and they'll put their hands to their sides and they'll do this. I love this. This is igniting, right? Our mental ability, improving our mental ability, deepening our breath, right? Helping our meditative states. So this is our Gyan Mudra. You're just bringing one tip to the other, the second digit to the first, and allowing the other fingers to be loose, right? You're not doing it really hard. It's loose. So the Gyan Mudra, we could do just one hand. And I encourage you right now, we could try this first one just, let's just do it up like this, right? This is your Gyan Mudra. Make sure you're in your back body, right? Again, I admitted my habit earlier where I start to come forward and then I pull in like a little puppy, right? So I'm going to go ahead and align my spine. I'm going to really sit on my sits bones. And I'm going to allow my spine to move up from there. So I'm not collapsed. I'm not scared. I'm on my sacral. Yeah, I'm on those bones. My chest is relaxed. My jaw is loose. My neck is free. This is my Gyan Mudra. This particular mudra is good for memory loss, brain function. If we were to think about what we did before with reflexology, right, we could be pressing, right, on this area, but just holding is really powerful. And I'm going to share with you a few studies about the Gyan Mudra that have been conducted that really speak to the efficacy of mudra work. Next, we're going to move into the Chin Mudra or Consciousness Mudra, where you take both like this and you just place them on your lap or your knees. If you were sitting cross-legged, they'd be a little bit out to the side, but if you're sitting down like me, they're just on my lap, on my thighs. This is the Consciousness Mudra. And again, I always have to do that check-in. Where is my sacrum? Where is my pelvis? Am I collapsed? Am I tucking? Am I free? Am I safe? Is my heart open? Am I in my back body? Is my jaw clenching? Is my neck free? This is known as the consciousness mudra, as it expands consciousness, but also the same, good for mental balance, mental function. Notice that we are at the level of the frontal cortex when we're pressing here in this particular mudra. The knowledge mudra is taking this, and instead of having it upturned, you place it down. So you could do it if you are sitting cross-legged. This area of your palm will be over your kneecaps. So right now, I'm just having it on my thighs, my mid-thigh, with my palms down, right? This is, again, of course, mental balance, but also good for depression and anxiety. You could think about when something is up and open, that indicates reception, openness, being up and out. When you put something down, it's like cocooning and going within. So good for brain function, good for brain balance, but also for depression, anxiety, memory loss. And find out your check-in points are, right? I told you mine, my sacrum, my pelvis, my tuck, my release, my heart, my jaw, my neck. Find out what yours are. When you do self-care for 5-10 seconds, find out what your habits are and see if you could send breath there and begin to shift them. And we end with the total wisdom mudra, the Purana Gyan Mudra, which again is the same. The only difference is one hand. I'm going to place my right hand at the level of my heart and the other one up, palm to the sky at my knee or my thigh if I'm sitting. And this is the total wisdom mudra. This we use when we are working with self or others who have addictive behaviors, overcoming depression, balancing sexual energy. It's called the total wisdom mudra because it connects to our innate, beautiful wisdom and intelligence. I was in a class, I was teaching a class once where it was a Zoom class. And so she thought, oh, I should be doing it here. And she actually did it with her palm facing her heart and the other one facing down. And she said she really liked the way that felt. So I encourage you to explore. We just did it 4 ways. The Gyan Mudra can be just here. It could be just one hand held in my hand as I'm listening to my Zoom meeting, whatever thing is happening. It could be both up and open and on my thighs, right? It could be face down, coming a little bit more within, or we could do it at the level of the heart. Okay. So there are 2 studies that I wanted to share with you about mudra work. I think about this often because I do mudra therapy and reflexology. I really love seeing how they cross over and how they complement each other, and they really, really do. But so one of these studies was the International Journal of Current Advanced Research. International Journal of Current Advanced Research, Gyan Mudra, a critical and correlative study with modern science. The conclusion of the study: after 4 months duration, we found in 50 patients, Gyan Mudra increases their concentration, learning capacity, memory power, wakefulness, awareness, and alertness up to 60%. It's a good journal too. It's a pretty powerful thing to have in a journal. Okay, the next one is the International Journal of Yoga, classification of electrophotonic images of yogic practice of mudras on neural networks. The conclusion, and this was in August of 2018, the conclusion: holding a mudra for 20 minutes daily over a 3-day period resulted in significant increase in the flow of energy through neural networks. Okay. I will say just a little thing about that 20 minutes a day. Very safe to do Gyan Mudra 20 minutes a day. The only mudras, and these are more advanced mudras anyway, that you want to be mindful of is anything that suppresses an element. So our fingers represent different elements. So you wouldn't want to suppress fire or wind or earth energy for too long, right? But igniting can be very, very powerful. And Gyan Mudra for everybody is very sweet. So that's where we are right now. How are you guys doing? Any insights, questions, ideas, anything come to mind before we move into our days and nights?
Well, Chantel, I just have one thing about the 20 minutes. I think that I always tell people to start with a minute and set their timer with anything. It's just like your 10 seconds, because I was told a long time ago to palm my eyes for 20 minutes. And I looked at them like, you're nuts. And so if you are living a life out there, you can't find 20 minutes to start. So I always tell people, start with a minute. Set everyone, I don't know anyone who doesn't have a cell phone nowadays, set it for a minute or even 30 seconds to start, and then gradually add when you feel you can. So that's my 2 cents.
I love it. I love your 2 cents. I always love your 2 cents. Anyone else?
What if you know somebody who's maybe too weak or too old to do the mudras? Could I then help the person? Could I hold his fingers?
Yeah, you could do one of 2 things. So you can do, this is kind of, well, I'm just going to say it. You could actually do the mudras for them in your body, for yourself. When we think about the connectivity of all things, all beings, we are all connected. And when we, and we see this with, I do a lot of long distance Reiki work, and we see this with, there is a profound connectivity. I could be working with somebody in China, right? And we could feel each other. So you could actually do it for them. Or it's tricky if they have any kind of itis, any kind of inflammation at the level of the joints, whether it's rheumatoid or osteoporosis, anything, osteoarthritis rather. You just want to be very mindful that there's no pain. You could, if there is a sweet way to like assist and hold their hand, but I'd almost, it might be more advantageous to do another approach actually. Instead of forcing fingers, I would say actually to like cover a finger, like especially, to do that exercise. That's actually really good for helping with anxiety. Yeah. And then that person can either hold their finger or you can. Yeah. And very gentle. Yeah. Or you could also do that nice light pressing. You could do the rocking up and reflexology from the thalamus up too.
On the person's hand.
Yeah.
I could, yeah.
And I'm a big fan. We do it in Reiki all the time. I'm a big fan of holding someone's hand and staying there and staying there and staying there. Yeah. Were you there at the, we did a self-care for senior care. Were you in that one, or did you watch?
Oh, no, I wasn't. Oh, no. Can I find the
video? It's on my, you could find it either in the Facebook page or on the YouTube channel. It's called something like self-care for senior care or elderly care.
Oh, sweet.
It talks a lot about this
YouTube
kind of work.
is just your name, and then I'll find it.
Yeah. Chantel.
And then do you do long distance Reiki healing? So I could
oh my gosh, are we going to see each other again in a different way? Am I going to see you on the other side?
I'll look it up. That would be lovely. I'm sure you can reach Scandinavia.
Yes. Oh, it's beautiful to see. I can't see your face right now because every once in a while you go into shadow, but
yeah,
so good to see you.
You too.
Yeah. Anybody else? Any other insights or illuminations before we close?
Is there, so when we were doing the mudras, do you have, I mean, I'm sure I can just Google, but I really like how you had like the wisdom, you went in different levels. do you have like any images, or I can just rewatch this again?
Yeah, you know what I do? I'm working on doing a like a poster of
Yeah.
some so I'm working on the mudras themselves, but having just an explanation of like what they work on. It's gonna be a while. I'm working with a designer on it, so that is in the works. What I do, I just taught a class. I usually refer people to, I think it's Yogapedia. They have really beautiful sketches of every mudra. So usually I tell people to go to there. And
Okay.
yeah, but you're right. Something that also has, and actually Yogapedia does do that. They'll have the sketch, what it looks like, and it's very pretty the way they've drawn it. And then they talk about what it is. But for me, I'm like you. I like bullet points. I like to know, like, if that's what you're saying, I'm like that too.
Yes. And also, the two journals that you were speaking of, is there any way that you could like put it in the chat or something so that way
Yes.
I can, I'm
Yeah,
curious about those. That's sounds amazing.
you got it. Totally. I'll definitely do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Ah, okay. So let us move into our days and afternoons and evenings. I will post this video probably tomorrow. And thank you for joining me, everybody. Much love.
Thank you, Chantel.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Much love.
Much love.
Thank you.